English translation, 893rd contact Saturday, the 3rd of August 2024, 6:13 hours.
There you are. Earlier than you radioed me yesterday, but welcome, Quetzal, and greetings.
Greetings also to you, dear friend Edward. It seems that your health is improving. It really took many weeks for you to recover somewhat after your stay in hospital. However, it is obviously not yet back to normal for you to be fully recovered. But your call requires that I come here and report to you what the committee understands regarding your question about signing documents that are addressed to FIGU non-members, such as companies, tradesmen, and other businesses, etc. Of course, I immediately took the matter in hand and asked what your question was to be understood as and how everything should be implemented according to the committee's meaning. I can answer the committee's answer to you exactly as it was explained to me, that a letter to contractors or companies, etc., as well as inquiries, which are issued in accordance with a valid overall group decision, must of course be signed by the person commissioned or the FIGU member authorized to do so. However, this is to be done so that it is recognizable that this person or the FIGU member is acting on behalf of the FIGU group. That is why the committee decided at an early stage in the development of the rules that everything of this nature is to be done in the name of the FIGU Association, which you also requested in writing and which was submitted to the FIGU core group members by the secretary. Accordingly, in the future, every letter addressed to external companies, etc., should be marked so that the respective decision is recognizable in the name of the community of the FIGU Association, whereby, however, everything should be such that every reply to every inquiry, every answer, etc., is not to be addressed to the respective commissioned FIGU person, but always and only to the FIGU Association. The committee's instructions in this regard are therefore to be worded as follows. Signed on behalf of the FIGU Association signature of authorized signatory.
Signed for the FIGU Association signature of authorized signatory.
Only in this wise is it clearly stated that no individual is responsible for the entirety of the community's decision. That is to say that no individual has the power, but only the community of the FIGU Association can make and order a valid decision. The committee considers this to be necessary in order to prevent what is common to a large percentage of humanity on Earth, namely that immense damage, destruction, and even insolvency result from the seizure of power, fraud, breach of trust, greed, and other dishonest and criminal machinations, etc. This is because a certain majority of Earth humans strive for wealth and pleasure, very often in greed and dishonesty, whereby they fanatically crave, without burdening their conscience in the slightest, to be able to make or realize what truly corresponds to a delusion, as well as to dishonesty and something rash, to selfishness, to all illogicality, to the lack of rationality, and absolutely in every wise to a sham thinking without any analytical values. Wealth and pleasure are not only delusional, but even morbidly conditioned in very many Earth humans. So there is always the danger that this may break through sooner or later in this or that Earth human and cause great harm. This is also possible if the human being in question is associated with the FIGU Association, because the majority of Earth humans are not immune to such temptations regarding their own fallibility, as our accurate investigations have shown. The committee has been conducting research on this through us since 1960, which has revealed unpleasant facts, namely that in large parts of Earth humanity, constantly lurking ambitions of wanting to rule are present, and also tendencies of dogmatism, falseness and lies, fraud and general dishonesty, greed for money, addiction to pleasure, addiction to holidays and traveling to foreign countries, and possibly also forms of delusion, can gradually or suddenly break through acutely. Of course, it should not be assumed that this also applies or can apply to members of the Figu Association Mata Center or to members of a Figu Association group abroad. But the committee would like to mention that this possibility may become possible sooner or later, and that certain measures will have to be taken against it. However, this should be counteracted at an early stage by the committee's logically well thought out rules, so that such incidents do not occur in the future, and the Figu Association in the Mother Center and all Figu groupings worldwide are well protected against them. Consequently, the global community of the Figu Association is to be protected from all the criminals that are rampant worldwide and from the behavior of the majority of Earth humans, which is derogatory of honesty, and it is to be prevented that neither the Figu Association of the Mother Center nor any other Figu Association grouping abroad is harmed. This can only be achieved by means of a community responsibility, namely by deciding and writing down everything and anything of importance and of lesser importance respectively, absolutely only by the whole group. The resolution is then to be handed over by the Secretary as a letter of instruction to the Figu Association member who is determined by the community resolution to carry it out.
Then that is clear. But I think that if you are coming here, and it is not so urgent that you leave again, we can also talk to each other. It would also help me if I could just call you, and you could come here if there is something I should discuss with you, or I have to ask you.
Of course, there's nothing to stop that.
Good, but what if it is important and something needs to be recorded and documented in writing?
I think that will be possible, but I can only say that from my side. I will have to ask the committee, which is very concerned about your health, how they see it.
Of course, but I think that it is logical if you can come here and we can discuss important matters, and I can also call up the conversation and write it down.
That corresponds to a logical argument that will probably be taken into account by the committee. It is also necessary for me to come here if you have important things to discuss or ask, because that is how I think it should be.
I think so too. And also with regard to the fact that a lot of things are said that do not necessarily have to do with the importance of the matter at hand, but can still be called up and written down. That would be reasonable.
I have nothing against that, and I think it is actually logical.
Exactly. That is why I think I can also present you with the following, which I have written again, and which Bernadette is now making into a brochure because it is important. Namely this here, which I want to read to you.
The independent thinking of human beings.
Not a belief, but independent thinking brings human beings to a true and contented life, and thus to their comprehensive mental health, and thus to true love and peace and freedom with themselves and their fellow human beings.
All around the existence, energy and power of creation, whose diametrical dimensions of its 7 universes, etc. As well as regarding its workings, as well as the being of all forms of matter and of the myriad fauna and flora.
Creation in its endless energy and power is not only the absolute existence of the universe in seven-fold form of 7 universes, each with its own dimension, but also a natural energy and natural force that spreads throughout the cosmos of the 7 universes and on every material planet that is capable of life in every form and wise. Creation is the actual energy force of the entire universal nature in all its 7-fold universe areas and all their dimensions, as also in all planets arranged in these with their endless and countless dimensions of the past and future, as well as all types of matter and thus all stars, gases, planets, and their life of all genera and types of fauna and flora, as well as all things in the 7-fold universe area of the 7 dimensions of creation. The 7-fold universes of creation, which are given and differently dimensioned according to their genus and species, are uniform in their entire nature of the billions of forms of matter as well as the fauna and flora. This means that all life of all genera and species of all countless tiniest forms of matter of the fauna and flora are absolutely uniform in their effective origin in all 7 universes and their dimensions of creation. And this applies to the tiniest microbes and the even tinier energy particles that form the actual beginning and origin of all becoming, but which are still completely unknown to earthly science and will remain so for a long time to come. All the myriad forms of matter and all the fauna and flora of every genus and species are, even if they are, diametrically different in dimension, the same in all the cosmos of the 7 universes of creation, and therefore not different from universe to universe. In all the cosmos of all the 7 universes of creation, the same basic conditions for the existence of all kinds of matter and all kinds of fauna and flora prevail, which are already so diverse in only one of the 7 universes of creation that they could be grasped by human beings with their intellect. In just one of the 7 cosmos of the diametrically dimensioned 7 universes of creation, there are so many life forms of matter, fauna, and flora in all dimensions of the past and the future, not to mention the present, that they cannot be comprehended by human beings on Earth. If we consider only the species and their races, then these alone have been so diverse on Earth since their natural emergence in primeval times until today, that at the present time it is only halfway clear which human beings have actually existed on this planet since the emergence of humans. What these human beings looked like in terms of their proportions is largely as unknown as the appearance of other human beings from distant planets is also unknown. Whether these beings are similar to Earth humans or even the same as them, whether they are animalistic and at the same time human or otherwise different, for Earth humans this still belongs to the realm of the unknown and the unknowable, but also to the realms of fantasy and imagination. In all the diametrically different dimensions of the 7 universes of creation, the types of matter and all the myriad faunas and floras attain their existence and become viable according to their genus and species, and also are how they equally demonstrate their existence in all 7 universes in their own dimensions, is determined by the times and their dimensions. Consequently, at the early stages of the development of a planetary body, all types of matter and land masses are still so different that they only develop and change in the course of evolution and the transformation of the whole, and only then take on a form that allows a real planet to develop. The initial lump formation, which is formed from individual parts and forms of matter that cannot be described precisely, asteroids, etc., of unclear and ambiguous origin, ultimately forms into the actual planet over billions of years through changes and evolution. The evolution of the planet Earth, which has taken place over billions and millions of years, and the constant influence of the universe, for example as a result of the impact of space dust and the impact of comets and asteroids, etc., on the planet, has resulted in constant change. This outdates everything that has existed and lived until now, as well as the minerals, and this upheaval also shifts the land masses and their structure and course, resulting in a new view of the planet. Consequently, everything changes and renews itself through absolutely completely innovative relationships of fauna, flora, atmosphere and climate, in fact, in an assimilating harmonious coordination with the new and thereby bringing everything into harmony. These changes can also give rise to water and thus the possibility of the first primitive life forms. This occurs initially through pure natural energies, from whose activity and effects tiny living organisms are formed, which over the course of millions and billions of years develop into the first solid life forms, which from then on animate the waters, the soil, the Earth's surface, and the air. The development and existence of the most diverse, lowest microflora development brings with it the development of further microorganisms, from which, over the course of millions and billions of years, plants of all kinds and species of the smallest living beings in water, soil, on land, and in the air arise. These later give rise to many different life forms, creatures, and then animals. This occurs according to the times of planetary development and its flora, atmosphere and climate, etc. Thus, the first micro-life forms arise from the microorganisms that were energetically created in the early days and also from the depths of the universe, namely life forms in water, in the soil, on land and in the air, from which ultimately a wide variety of life arises. This results from the entire evolutionary processes and changes of the planet, the atmosphere and the climate, when the fauna and flora of the planet evolves, which is repeated over millions and billions of years and then again brings forth new life that is of a diverse nature, which also resulted in the dinosaurs. At that time, around 66 million years ago, when a great deal of life on Earth was lost, and the fate of much of the planet's fauna and flora was sealed as a result of the impact of a large asteroid from space, a new transformation took place, renewing and starting over the entire fauna and flora on planet Earth. As a result, evolution brought about a change in all things, as it has done again and again over millions of years, and innumerable genera and species of extremely diverse life forms were consequently produced in water, in the soil, on land, and in the air. These were able to develop into the highly diverse life forms of all genera and species that we see today, in water, in the soil, on land, and in the air. However, since 1958 at the latest, this has been endangered not only in its entire existence by Earth humans and their excessive overpopulation, but also thoughtlessly and criminally destroyed, annihilated, and even viciously eradicated in many cases, and this in only around 66 years, which even the planet could not do in 5.5 billion years. In this way, however, Earth humans have done and continue to do everything in a completely indifferent, criminal and irresponsible manner in order to continue to harass and destroy, to annihilate, and even to irrevocably exterminate many of the planet's many genera and species of fauna and flora through idiotic, selfish, and dishonest machinations. The absolute majority of Earth humans do not care a jot about their responsibility towards all earthly life and existence of nature, its fauna and flora as well as the planet, because they only think of themselves and their own well-being. And those who take to the streets to protest about environmental protection, etc., and who shout and rave on the streets, do nothing to protect all life, the planet, nature, and its fauna and flora. On the contrary, they only cause damage and destruction, and often or only for the sake of profit and money as a reward that they receive from crazy, money-rich donors who, in an absolutely irresponsible manner, finance the willing demonstrators for their own benefit or out of crazy and perverse joy. Or the very easily influenced and misguided demonstrators allow themselves to be incited to demonstrate and to cause public or private damage by demonstrators who put themselves in the foreground and in the limelight of the media. Truly, very few human beings take their responsibility towards every life, the planet, nature and its fauna and flora seriously, because only an absolute minority is self-thinking and educated to such an extent that they see the effective truth, recognize it, and behave and act correctly according to the law. The majority of Earth humans, however, are only seemingly thinking, behave wrongly, and act contrary to what is natural and evolutionary, as it is also misregulated by state-imposed laws. This is because, due to low intelligence and thus a lack of thinking, and also out of fear, the majority of all peoples demand and promote that, at least in times of peace, which can even be changed to include minors and women in times of war, as in the Hitler War from 1939 to 1945, a state military service and thus an armed military are created and given. And this is how it happens. And hardly any human being who has fallen prey to his or her deluded thinking will lose a righteous thought that every human being who is drafted and obliged to serve in the military is trained by the state to become a murderer and then forced to murder when he is ordered to murder, kill and destroy in a war or for some other reason. This is contrary to the fact that correct thinking, behavior and action is absolutely essential for the existence and preservation of the planet, as well as for the smooth functioning of nature, fauna, and flora. Nature is truly the actual creation when it is seen as a universal existence, and this itself embodies the actual, absolutely pure natural being, but not an imaginary god of some misleading religion or sect who must be fervently, slavishly worshipped, adored, and implored with false prayers. Unfortunately, the human being has misunderstood the word prayer since time immemorial and has misused it religiously as worship, adoration, begging for help and veneration, etc. to an imaginary god or to numerous gods. However, prayer is truly a meditative and devout expression of appreciation, honor and gratitude for all that exists, namely nature, which not only works in the cosmos but also throughout the universe as energy and power, and is the creation in its existence. Since time immemorial, prayer has been used by human beings in a meditative and devout way to express their thanks, honor and appreciation of nature and creation, and, as explained, in moments of thanking, honoring and appreciating the whole of nature and creation, respectively, which brought forth and allowed to flourish everything and anything necessary for life through their energy and power. The respect, basic attitude, sympathy, behavior and inner attitude of human beings towards nature and creation respectively was completely natural and without belief, but solely truthfully oriented towards the perceptible, ascertainable, visible, and perceptible, and real. Thus, the thoughts and aspirations of human beings were only formed to such an extent as to be real for them in terms of thought, logical consideration, and in this regard. Unfortunately, however, this changed, as is unfortunately the traditional custom of human beings, when other human beings with fantasies and confused ideas turned against the natural world in contrast, and consequently seduced the real thinkers, the logically truth-seeking thinkers, and turned them into believers in the crazy, fanatical fantasies and all the confused ideas of madness, as well as into the deluded, illusionary ideologues. This happened because the fanatical fantasists and crazy idea-mongers kept on annoying the logically, truth-seeking people for so long and undermined their logic until they began to doubt it and ultimately ignored and forgot it, becoming believers in the crazy and confused, indoctrinated fantasies and delusions and becoming enslaved to them. And it came as it should have come according to the thinking of the convincing ones, namely that the majority of Earth humans bowed to the beliefs of the fantasists and the bringers of delusions and fell hopelessly into their lies of persuasion. When suddenly also deities and thus gods were woven into the lies of persuasion, the Earth humans who had already fallen prey to faith accepted these imaginary beings of delusion as the imagined creators of nature, the universe, and as protectors and helpers of human beings on Earth, whereby these gods also had to be worshipped and adored, as all the strictly God-believing earthlings have to do to this day. In particular, because these divine beings, who are certainly imaginary in every case, have led to a wide range of religious delusions and confused sects worldwide. There are no limits to the fanatical and stultifying beliefs of human beings. This is particularly the case today with the prisoners of faith of those religions that have dedicated themselves to an imaginary one God, such as the religions and sects of Christianity and Islam, who live in the delusion that a God-creator in heaven, who has generated and created everything and everyone, who sustains it, and is therefore the creator of all things, as well as the good and holy guardian and protector of human beings, and of everything. Now, however, the following should be explained, in particular in the German language. The term prayer has become so religious, so established and changed, that instead of being a form of meditative devotion of thanks, honor and appreciation of nature, of everything that exists, and thus of creation, it is now being abused as a religiously characterized banter, and is finding its worthlessness. This is because prayer has been wrongly transformed into a religious sectarian practice, and has been understood as an imaginary god, as begging, as a way of unloading fear and calling for help, etc., and has been used in this way ever since the old High German word Gebet was wrongly understood and transformed into something worthless. Unfortunately, this has been so misunderstood that it is now only understood and used in a religious and sectarian sense, and not as a prayer of thanks, honor and appreciation of nature and thus of creation, but as a false and perverted plea for help and blessing, etc. in its original form. Emmanuel also taught, as all true messengers before him, that the being of creation which was already understood and explained to human beings by all true messengers as the existence of nature and the existence of nature should be treated with reverence and respected in every way and not harmed in any way. This is because every act of harming endangers and destroys life and even destroys it irrevocably and in the long run. But the religion and sect-believing earth human, who in particular worships an imaginary religious god and begs him for help, misunderstood the term Gebet, even in ancient times, which originally had nothing to do with a religious sectarian prayer, from which the meaning of asking, begging, adoration and worship, as well as subservience and the like, emerges. Basically, the value of the word Gebet was the opposite of giving, namely so that something is not to be asked for or begged for, but given. It was therefore a free, meditative, devotional, verbal or non-verbal silent expression of thanks, honor and appreciation towards nature and all that is creational. The creation itself is not to be implored for help, for it is the essence of nature itself, and the human being should meet it with dignity and honor, in such a way that he brings honor and dignity to it in gratitude and of his own free will. And this can be done very well by human beings through meditative devotion, which they have understood as prayer since time immemorial, but which should not be done in the religious sense of begging and seeking help, but in a completely neutral way of good and honest value, of bringing thanks in honor and dignity to everything in life and existence of nature. The material visible aspects of nature, as well as all the invisible parts of everything that nevertheless exists in nature, are all part of the being of creation itself, and thus the truth of its essence, creation, and its extensive and true existence. And all that has now been said and explained has been the result of the energy and power of creation since the very beginning of its existence, which is the source of evolution and the existence of all life, and this in all its diametrically different dimensional 7 universes. Whereby, however, in all their cosmoses, everything and every formation of the orders and their existence is structured differently, and thus differently organized and constantly changing. Consequently, in the arrangement in each individual cosmos of all the diametrically differently dimensioned 7 universes, it is given that a completely different order exists, which is so different from every other cosmos in the 7 universes of creation that no comparisons can be made. However, this only applies to the different orders of the cosmos, because with regard to everything else of every kind and form, everything is given in the same way, so that there can never be a difference. Creation as energy and power is everything that reveals itself as the essence of nature and its energy and power, and as such creation is the being and apparent non-being, respectively life and apparent death. However, this corresponds in truth only to a period of rest in order to build up more knowledge and stronger energy and power, and then to lead a current existence as material life with renewed vigor. In this way, a continuous birth, a life and an apparent non-being as well as an unstoppable renewal result. And it should be said and explained again and again that creation is not a being to be worshipped and venerated, but a natural entity full of energy and power and absolutely pure nature, which human beings should consciously honor, thank, honor, and appreciate, and with which they should be connected in a grateful way in their thoughts and feelings, and be consciously one with it. The human being can do this by practicing his daily thankful, honest and grateful devotion to the connection, especially if he does this in conscious meditative devotion, by honoring it in peace and quiet, in honor and dignity. This honorable and dignified devotion to creation should always be done in a neutral way, and in fact, daily in such a way that the human being considers this as a voluntary open thought, or meditative contemplation and immersion as a longer or shorter duty. In this way, creation, which is truly the all-encompassing entity of nature in all its existence and its constant giving birth, renewing, becoming, and endless existence, is shown respect, honor, dignity, and also gratitude through devotion to it. Billy, 31st July 2024.
I want to take a picture of this so that I can read it again in detail later. What you are saying here is really very valuable.
Exactly, I also think so, because questions are always being asked about it, but I cannot answer them simply because I do not have the time to answer them. Elizabeth is probably trying to answer questions, but to do so in as much detail as I have done here, she also lacks the time, and probably also the necessary knowledge.
That is understandable, because everything that the teaching encompasses is so extensive that it cannot be grasped in its entirety.
That is right, because I also come up against limits. Because I have to give in, even though I have learned from Svath to the point of exhaustion. So there are still many small and large secrets that remain hidden to me. This is also the case even though I know a lot through Svath and the journeys into the past and the future. So I remain a small fry in terms of knowledge, because I have not eaten it with a shovel and am therefore not omniscient. Of course I know about events in the past, such as the fact that on the planet Mars, millions of years ago, I also know that our science is completely wrong about many things, such as the fact that the swindler Charles Darwin was right with his claim that human beings descended from apes. The truth is that about 45 million years ago, a furry creature developed, from which the first human being emerged, who then appeared almost simultaneously all over the Earth. From this, several dozen different species developed, from which, if I may say so, various races of early humans emerged, who continued to interbreed and ultimately created the beings that began to dominate the Earth as Homo sapiens. So, For a long time before these Homo sapiens, there were various other types or races of human beings who interbred and ultimately gave rise to the so-called Neanderthal, from which Homo sapiens ultimately developed. These were preceded by all kinds of other human forms, ranging from dwarfism to gigantism, so pygmies of less than a meter to giants of 5 meters in height. It should be noted, however, that not all of these beings evolved into pure human forms, and their distant descendants still live in some hidden areas today, where they are occasionally seen by humans, who are usually frightened and, depending on the country, report encounters with monsters, yetis, Bigfoot, Meithe, Dzuthe, Snowman, the Ema, Skoda-Karak, Chuchuna, Mago, Yeren, Ngwalrung, Skunk Ape, and Yowie, etc., who have encountered them. And in fact, such human-like beings still exist today, despite all the denials of know-it-alls who call everything wild fantasies. Illusions and fantasies and are so lowly intelligent that they are unable to separate the reality of the truth from their deluded beliefs, even if they call themselves scientists. This is also the reason why these denial-obsessed human beings cannot understand that the future of the Earth and humanity will be very unpleasant as a result of overpopulation and all the very unpleasant destructive effects of the ongoing wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. Namely, and this is because America alone, in its stubborn hegemony delusion, with those states in tow that go along with it in their Americanism, and deliver weapons to Ukraine and show solidarity with America, as similarly in the Middle East with Israel, that inevitably and irrevocably, America will bear the blame for this. And so America is the greatest danger to Earth and humanity, along with the EU dictatorship, which in the future this is unfortunately the truth, along with the danger of the ruling neo-Nazis in Germany, who are being fought by and...
But you should not say everything you have said openly.
Of course not, because I am not saying it officially, just to you, and then when I call up and write down the conversation, I will put my dots where I should be silent. But it occurs to me that I am constantly being told equal pay for all. I have to object to that, because equal pay can only be given to those who do the same work overall. But those who do less or more or much more than is normally the case should be paid according to their performance. That is my understanding, because every human being should be fairly rewarded according to their performance. In other words, according to the principle of equal work and equal performance equal pay, regardless of what kind of work it is. Only then can it be said that everyone is paid the same, because only when lighter work is paid differently from hard work or even harder or very hard work, according to its severity or effort, and is the same for everyone who performs the same activity, can it be said that everyone is paid the same. Equal pay for all can only apply if everyone performs the same activity of the same type and with the same commitment.
If I follow your explanation, then there is no contradictory logic to be seen in it.
That is my view. But what do you say to the fact that climate change will now come into its own, which was caused by the fault of overpopulation and its many destructive machinations on the planet itself, on nature and on fauna and flora? As I experience together with Svath in the future, there will be around 200,000 deaths in Europe and in Spain, Morocco and Eurasia within a short period of just 1 year, which will not only be due to heat-related deaths, but also because many people will die from carbon-related causes. Because overpopulation is producing so much carbon that it is already 117 times higher than the emissions of all the world's volcanoes combined.
Unfortunately, that is a fact, as I know.
Unfortunately, the Earthlings will not be taught because the madmen demand that more offspring should be produced, such as the lunatics in Germany or Putin in Russia. The completely insane Musk is even spreading the lie worldwide that the Earth could bear, cope with, and feed 10 times more Earthlings than the world's current population of almost 10 billion, namely 9.6 billion. And the fact that many foods, so-called, are already adulterated with substances that cause diseases, such as various types of cancer, is kept secret, as is the fact that many important foods are mixed with liquids or powders that are made from insects, insect eggs or oviparrots, or from larvae, maggots, and pupae, as well as from various earthworms, etc. This is usually kept secret, however, because the food that has been adulterated in this way would not be bought or used. But the future, with its increasing overpopulation, means that food manufacturers will have no choice but to resort to these methods of producing food.
Svath also points this out in his annals.
He has written quite a bit about it because he made some rather strange comments about it. But he also repeatedly railed against the slanderers and falsifiers, such as the illustrators and painters who traced my photographs, which I was able to take with a folding camera, namely pterosaurs, etc., which were drawn in such a painterly and artistic way, and are still in circulation today, that they are considered to be purely imaginative works of art.
That is actually recorded in his annals. Although he also mentioned the old folding camera, which, if I remember correctly, he described as a photo bag camera, folding camera vintage, and French Lumiere from the 1930s. The man had a studio back then.
That is right, he had a photography business and was well disposed towards me. I do not know whether Svath mentioned the camera in his annals. But I remember very well that he was furious because some artists were tracing my photos, which, as we later saw on future trips, were presented as fantasy pictures. But let us leave that, because contrary to such lies and falsifications, it is only right that we know the truth and do the right thing according to it, that we live and act correctly.
That is right, but now I have to go again, although I would like to point out to you once again that you should call me if something important comes up.
Yes, that is clear and good, and I will do it.
Then I will leave now. Goodbye, dear friend. We do not want to overdo it and stick to the instructions of the committee.
That is indeed something to consider. Goodbye, Quetzal, my friend.
Goodbye, and I will report to you as soon as I know from the committee.